Hello, my name is Ari Waldman. I'm a stutterer. Today is my video YouTube Parsha, day 56, Sunday, December 20th, 2020. The 5th of Kislev. I'm working on pausing. Here goes from Chabad.org, my daily Tanya, daily study, daily Tanya. On the other hand, if a person is one of those who gluttonously eat meat and quaff wine in order to satisfy their bodily appetites and animal soul, then since of the animal soul's four evil elements, this desire belongs to the element of water, from which comes the appetite for pleasure. Ach mi shehu bizol lule basar v'soveve yayin lamalot ta'avad gufo v'nafsho habehema habahamit shehu b'chinat yesod hamayim me'arba yesodot hara'im sheba shemimenu midat hatava. As explained in the first chapter, all evil characteristics come from the four evil elements of the animal soul, with the appetite for pleasures emanating from the element of water. In such case, the vitality of the meat and wine that he ingested is thereby degraded and absorbed temporarily, and the utter evil of the three unclean klipot. Hine al yedei ze yored chayot, habasar v'hayayin shebekirbo, v'nichlal, lefi sha'a bara, gamor shebe shalosh klipot hatameot. The glutton's body becomes a garment and a vehicle for these klipot. V'gufu na'aseh lahen levush u'merkova. The term vehicle is an analogy for total subservience, just as a vehicle is completely subservient to the will of its driver, having no will of its own. So in this case, this person totally subservient to the three unclean klipot, but his body remains so only temporarily until the person repents and returns to the servant of God and his Torah, whereupon he ceases to be a vehicle for klipot. The energy of the food and drink is then released from the klipot and returns to sanctity. Lefi sha'a ad asher yashuv ha'adam v'yachazor la'avodat Hashem u'letorato. For inasmuch as the meat and wine were kosher and possible, and it was only the person's desire for pleasure that degraded them, they have the power to revert and ascend with him when he returns to the service of God, at which time the strength gained from the food and drink are utilized in serving God. Ki lefi shahaya basar heter v'yayin kasher l'chach cholim lachazor la'alot imo v'shuvo la'avodat Hashem. This is implied in the terms heter, permissibility, and mutar, permissible. That which may be done or eaten is called mutar, literally meaning released or unbound. In our context, the term means that the permissible object is not chained to the klipot. That is to say, it is not tied and bound to the power of the extraneous forces, i.e. the klipot and sitra achra, which are extraneous to the realm of sanctity, shezehu, lashon heter, umutar kolomar, she'eno kashur, ve'asur, bidei hachitzonim, preventing it from returning and ascending to God, shlo yucha lachazor, v'la'alot l'Hashem. Rather, it can return and ascend to God when the person involved returns to the service of God, as explained above. Nevertheless, even when this energy reverts to sanctity, through the person's return to the service of God, a trace of the evil remains in the body. Rak shehar shimu mimenu nishar baguf. Eating permissible food for bodily pleasure causes the food to descend into total evil. Subsequently, the food becomes part of the energy of the food and drink as well. Still having become a part of the body, a vestige of evil remains. For this reason, the body must undergo the purgatory of the grave, as will be explained later. V'al kein sarich haguf l'chibut hakever kamo sheyidba'ir l'kaman. Like all heavenly punishments, purgatory of the grave, too, is a means of spiritual purification. All remaining traces of evil energy created by eating and drinking for bodily pleasure are removed through this punishment. So too with regard to the vitality of the drops of semen emitted from the body with animal lust by he who has not conducted himself in a holy manner during intimacy with his wife during her state of purity. Here too the vitality is temporarily absorbed in the total evil of the three unclean klipot until the person repents. V'chein hachayut shebetipot zera sheyatzu mimenu betava b'ha'amit shelo kiddush atzmo bishat tashmish im ishto tahora. In the above instances, the fault lies not in the acts which in themselves are permissible, but rather in the person's intention in doing them, acting out of regard for bodily pleasure, not for the sake of heaven. Such is not the case, however, with forbidden foods and illicit coition, which, inasmuch as they are prohibited, acts derive their vitality from the three entirely unclean klipot. Ma she'ein kein b'ma'achalot asurot uviot asurot she'ein mishalosh yafot hatameot legamre. These are tied and bound by the extraneous forces, the klipot forever. Heim asurim ukshurim bidei hachitzonim liolam. They, the vitality of these prohibited acts, are not elevated from the klipot until their day comes, the time when evil will totally disappear from the world, when death, i.e. the klipot called death, because they opposite godliness, which is life, will be swallowed up, i.e. eradicated forever. As it is written, and I, God, will remove the spirit of impurity from the earth. Then when these kalipot cease to exist, the sparks of holiness will of themselves be freed from them. Vein olam misham ad ki yavo yomam v'yavula hamavet lanetzach kemo shekatuv ve'et ruach hatuma a'avir min ha'aretz. Or until the sinner repents in the manner presently described, in which case the sparks of holiness need not remain in the clutches of the klipot until the end of days. They may even be freed and restored to holiness when he, the sinner, repents so earnestly that his premeditated sins become transmuted into veritable merits. O ad sheyaseh teshuva gedola kol kach shedonot nasu lo kiz chuyot mamash. This is achieved through repentance out of love of God, coming from the depths of the heart with great love and fervor, and from a soul passionately desiring to cleave to the blessed God. She teshuva me ahava me umka deliba ba'ava rabba v'chashika v'nefesh shokeka l'dav kabo yitbarech. And thirsting for God, like a parched and barren soil thirsts desperately for water, v'tzama nafsho l'Adonai ki eretz ayefa v'tzia. For inasmuch as until now, until he repented, his soul had been in a barren wilderness and in the shadow of death, which is the Sitra Achara, and has been far removed from the light of the divine countenance in the greatest possible measure. Liyot ki ad heina, haita nafsho be'eretz sia, v'tzal mavet hi ha-sitra achara, urechoka me'or, pnei Hashem betachlit. Therefore now that he repents out of love, his soul thirsts for God even more intensely than the souls of the righteous who have never sinned. Lazot sama nafsho beyeter oz betzimon, but nafshot had tzadikim. The righteous tzaddik, ever close to God, is like one who always has water near his hand. His thirst is never too intense. The penitent, however, finds himself as if in a desert where the very absence of water causes his thirst to burn with greater intensity. As our sages say, where penitents stand, not even the perfectly righteous can stand. For as explained earlier, that tzaddik lacks penitence, intense yearning for God. Kema'a marom zichronam livracha b'makom sheba le'teshuva omdim chulei. Only concerning repentance, out of such great love, has it been said that the penitent's premeditated sins become for him like virtues, since through the sins which previously had distanced him from God, he attained when he repented to this great love. Thus, his sins affected him in the same way as mitzvot. They brought about within him a greater love of God. Ve'al teshuva me'ahava rabba, zo amru shezdonot, nasu lo kizchuyot ho'il ve'al yedei zeh, bala'ava rabba zo. In summary, it is possible even now, before evil completely disappears from the earth, to extricate the vitality of forbidden acts from the klipot through repentance out of love of God. But in the case of repentance that does not come from such love, though it be proper repentance, and God will surely pardon him, nevertheless his sins are not transformed for him into the equivalent of virtues. Aval teshuva shalo me'ava zo, af shehi teshuva nechona, Hashem yislach lo mikol makom lo nasu lo hizchuyot. They are not released and hence do not completely ascend from the klipa, so that no trace of the sin remains until the end of time, when death will be swallowed up forever. Ve'ein olim mea klipa legamre ad eight kates shiv ula hamavet lanetzach. Thus we have learned that the energy of forbidden foods and illicit coition is released from the klipot only when one repents out of love or when evil ceases. Now we shall learn that in the case of one specific prohibition, ordinary repentance can accomplish what normally requires repentance out of love. This is the end of my video, Tanya, day 56. Have a great night.